next we have Grand Chief Derek Nepinak, actually from the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, who's come here to join us and say some good words. Hi, thank you, Chief, for coming.
Bonjour, Nichuagana. Shigon Denewe Maganato. Nibin Makwa, Indigenous Makwan Totem. My name is Derek Nepinak, Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, and I just introduced myself in the language of my ancestors, the language that's been spoken throughout the Northern Plains for the last several thousands of years. It's a language that my children are beginning to learn in this age of resurgence, in this age of reconciliation. On behalf of over 60 member communities in Manitoba who represent over 150,000 Indigenous people, it's my honor to be here this afternoon and throughout the day to participate in this very important dialogue. Honored to sit with the leadership of the territory, as well as Jane Fonda and Barbara, who have traveled here to help continue to build the message about the transitions that we need to make from what we've been relying on for the last number of decades. I have been actively involved in this discussion space for a number of years now, operating more than just from a political platform, actually getting deeply engaged and involved in the processes, the regulatory processes. I think first identifying the crises in 2012 with the rise of Idle No More, the stripping away of regulatory platforms and processes that would allow for a fast tracking of a lot of these projects that we're now seeing coming through today. Recognizing a responsibility that we had to stand up at that time as the original people of these lands who are still aware of our natural laws, and the need for us to go back to operating and implementing and living within our natural laws. And that means ceremony, the revitalization of ceremonies. So if you see me standing here in my colors, it's because I observe the ceremonies of my people and I share that with you. I want to acknowledge Chief Tony Alexis for his words, Ariel's leadership, Melina's leadership, Mike, who's playing a key role here today, and of course the drum that brought us in here in a good way. I observe those protocols back home as well. And I also want to acknowledge the tobacco that's been passed. I want to acknowledge my ally in the Treaty Alliance, Chief Stuart Phillip from the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. We've worked very hard across the country, from the east to the west, to build over 120 signatories to the Treaty Alliance against tar sands expansion. You see, this is not about a divisive narrative or divisive rhetoric. It's not about provocation. And if you're provoked in an angry way because of what we say as Indigenous people, you may want to reflect upon where that anger comes from, because it does come from fear. And I think we have to be brave in this day and age, recognizing that this transition, this just transition that needs to be made now, it's going to take brave people who are willing to have a dialogue and sit and discuss difficult discussions, difficult issues, without getting angry with one another. I was a little bit surprised, at some of the discussion, some of the social media coming out of Jane's visit into the Northern Territories, because I've lived here for a number of years in the past, along the watersheds, and I believe that this is a beautiful territory. There's beautiful, progressive, hardworking people in this territory. We should be opening up our arms and welcoming people who want to help elevate the message that we need to carry, that this transition time is upon us. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs engaged in the National Energy Board process to talk about Enbridge's Line 3 replacement project. We ventured out into an unprecedented exercise of engaging our elders, and what we provided to the world in the English language so that it could be understood is what we call Gitchitabak Nongalen. That is the Great Binding Law. The Great Binding Law speaks of original instructions that were shared with humankind about how to maintain balance with the natural world that we live in. And I believe that our people had lived by the natural laws for generations upon generations, because we never compromised the environment to the point of catastrophe that we're now facing. We lived within those natural laws in such a way that allowed us to persist here for thousands of years, for us to be the original wealthy people of these lands. And I observe those laws in the ceremonies that are carried by our elders. I observe those laws in the languages that are now coming back, that our children are speaking to us, It's a beautiful, beautiful experience when you hear a 3 or 4-year-old speaking the Cree language or the Ojibwe language or the Dene language. It's a beautiful thing to witness. These things are all happening at a time that was foretold many generations ago by our scientists, by our knowledge keepers. And it's now time in this day of reconciliation, if that's what we're going to call it, to recognize that Western science has not taken care of the land that we live on. So if popular politicians of the day in Ottawa are saying we're going to rely on the best Western science that's out there, then you should be worried. You should be a little bit worried. Because the true scientists are the Indigenous people who have been living here for thousands of years successfully. I can make these observations. I can make these observations with resolve because I've witnessed these processes through the NEB, through our participation. And I saw that the ceremonies that we invited the Prime Minister to, the ceremonies that we invited the regulators to, the panelists, the experts in Western science, the ceremonies we invited them to that they ignored are still there for everybody. You know, we're living in a time now where we're willing to share what we know, but we need people to be willing to participate with us. These doors are open to understand how we've been able to thrive here for so long. The approval that came in for Enbridge Line 3 completely excluded any of the work that we did. Any of the work that we did in engaging our elders and the ceremonies we did through the Turtle Lodge and one of our great spiritual leaders, Dave Crishane Jr., all that stuff was just kind of relegated to a brief mention in the consultation report. None of our Indigenous laws or legal traditions were reflected in the decision that was made. So I ask you, when we hear talk from popular politicians about reconciliation, you have to recognize that a lot of this is just rhetoric, it's just talk, it's not actually substantive, it's not finding its way into informing decision making because we're still being relegated to bystanders. And I can't be a bystander in a process that's going to involve implications and consequences that accrue to the detriment of my children. I wouldn't ask you to do that, and I hope that you wouldn't ask me to do that. You see, we're all in this mess together. We're all in this mess together, and we're running out of time. We have to lead that just transition. We need to move beyond popular political rhetoric. We need to move beyond identity politics, recognizing that, you know, our conversion of resources into pocket money for the day is accruing to the detriment of future generations. And that's something that we all have to pay attention to. Whether or not you follow our ceremonies or not, whether you go to a church or not, it doesn't matter. We have to get together on this thing and move forward in a positive way together. That's really the message that I wanted to share. That's really what the Treaty Alliance is all about. It's not about promoting division, even though it seems that popular media tries to do that from time to time, to promote divisions within our society. Because the more we're divided, the more the status quo is maintained. The more the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. We have to see past that now collectively as an informed society, as a society that's willing to work together on these things. So with that said, I just wanted to share that with you. We are moving forward through the Assembly with the Federal Court of Appeal on the challenge to the Line 3 replacement project. It's not because we don't want safe infrastructure out there. Everybody wants safe infrastructure. But what we have to do is create a space where Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous legal traditions, Indigenous legal systems are integrated into the decision-making process. That's what I believe is going to lead the day. Maybe that's for hearing me.